Hey, everybody. Welcome back. It's great to see you. Even though I actually can't see you, I still feel connected to so many of you. And I appreciate that aspect of these videos. I want to talk today about the benefits of doing shadow work. The most obvious ones that any of you who have been doing shadow work are already aware of is that it just makes you confident because you're not constantly shaming this sort of secret part of yourself. You're also able to express yourself more freely because you're not constantly scrutinizing people to see if they've caught a glimpse of this shameful secret part of you. And just in general, you feel more at home with yourself, more comfortable in your own skin. But the greatest benefit of shadow work is that it connects you with something greater than your ego. Most people, when they do something really well, like they give a great acting performance, or they suddenly write something spontaneously really well, or they speak spontaneously well, they'll admit that there's a feeling of, it wasn't me. Something flowed through me that was actually greater than me. Whatever that thing is that's flowing through you, you can call it the unconscious, higher forces, religions call it God. I don't really care what you call it, but I do care that you connect with it. And the shadow is the conduit to that experience, which raises a really interesting question. Why is the shadow, which is the part of us that feels most degraded, we're most ashamed and most embarrassed of it, why is it the conduit for the best and for the highest part of ourselves? Well, humankind has been wrestling with that issue from the very beginning of recorded history. Literally, in the second paragraph of Genesis, we're talking about a document that was written sometime between the 5th and 10th century BC. I mean, this is really old. We see Adam and Eve, and they are in a condition which is denoted as naked and unashamed. Naked and unashamed is code for completely unself-conscious, unaware of themselves as separate from their environment. Their consciousness is subsumed within God's consciousness. You could say it that way. Or you could say it another way. They have the consciousness essentially of a newborn infant. You know, a newborn infant doesn't know where its body ends and the environment begins. They're completely undifferentiated from their environment. The next step in the story is they eat of the tree of knowledge, and the knowledge that they gain is self-awareness. Now there are two selves. There is an observer and a part of them that's being observed. And they're not just observing themselves, they are judging themselves. Now they're naked and deeply ashamed. And it's just interesting to note what it is that they're ashamed of. They're ashamed of the most vulnerable part of the human anatomy, the organs of procreation. The organs of procreation are symbols of creativity, connectivity, and deep intimacy. So you get where we're going with this? From the very beginning, humankind developed a deep shame for the part of them that creates, connects, and is capable of the deepest kinds of intimacy. This is where the story gets even more interesting, which is Adam and Eve don't stop at judging themselves. They actually hide themselves. They cover themselves up with fig leaves. And what happens next is nothing less than unexpected and extraordinary. God asks the first question that God asks of humankind in the Bible. And the question is, where are you? It blew my mind the first time I read this. Where are you? I thought God was supposed to be omniscient, but somehow, by hiding the most vulnerable parts of themselves, the part of which they are most ashamed of, this omniscient God cannot see them, cannot reach them. Higher forces, creative flow, God, whatever you want to call that thing we all hunger for, it cannot reach you unless you are willing to uncover your shadow and bring it out into the open. Think about this for a moment because the implications are staggering. It really requires a radical revisioning of the way we think of our own vulnerability. When we feel vulnerable and in pain, we assume that we want help. Our experience is, I want help, but the help just isn't there. But the Genesis story is telling us something different. It's telling us, no, you don't really want help. In fact, you're so judgmental of your own vulnerability that you hide from the very help that you need. This is so startling, it really requires repetition to understand it. We take it as given that humankind is searching for God. That's actually the classical definition of religion. All religions represent humankind's search for God. C.S. Lewis's comment about this is, you might as well talk about the mouse searching for the cat. We don't search for it. We hide from it. Wrongly, as it turns out, we're fearful, afraid to be seen, afraid of exposing the very parts of us that most need help. If you want to say it a different way, we are so judgmental of ourselves and we project or imprint our judgments so much onto God that we assume God has the same judgments of us that we do. And that is how we cut ourselves off from a life-changing encounter with higher forces. Malcolm Guite, who's an Anglican priest that I study, says this beautifully. He says, most of human life and much of what passes for religious discourse, this is an Anglican priest speaking, much of what passes for religious discourse actually consists of fig leaves to keep God away. A patient of mine put this really poignantly. She had been an alcoholic her entire life. I think she started drinking when she was 6 or 7 years old. She said, I have been, her friends staged an intervention actually, and at first it was the worst nightmare of her life, but it turned out to be an incredible blessing. And in her next session with me, she said, I've been lying about alcohol my entire life. I've always been afraid of being caught. But when my friends staged the intervention, I didn't feel caught. I felt found, seen, loved for the first time in my life. Love came to find me where I most needed to be found. The upshot of all of this is that it is only through the shadow that we can sense our way back into a relationship with higher forces. Thank you for listening. Till next time.